On Wednesday, September 23rd, the news traveled through Unitarian Universalism that the most recent co-moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association, Alandria Williams, has died. Here's a note from her home congregation, the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. It is with great sadness that the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church announces the untimely and unexpected death of our favorite daughter, Alandria Williams, a child of our church who became a dynamic denominational leader, most recently as co-moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Please surround E's parents, Irvin and Elnora Williams, and brother Frederick with love. Those of us who taught E in Sunday school, nurtured E in youth, empowered E as a young adult, watched E blossom as a grassroots community organizer, and served with E in congregational and denominational leadership. Continue to be blessed by E's courage, E's conviction, and E's gigantic heart that filled our world with love. We have an address to which you can send a card to Alandria's family. If you'd like to do that, please reach out. Please continue to hold Alandria Williams' family in your care.
We must be passionate people. This moment is calling us to theologically root in, spiritually gather ourselves with nature and the earth as our God, to hold in what is always constant and true. To me, what's always constant and true is love, the divine spark of beauty inside each one of us, and the beauty of connections with each other and to the world.
Hi, welcome to worship today at the First Unitarian Church of Oakland on this Sunday, September 27th, 2020. My name is Alex Haider-Winnett. I am the interim Director of Religious Education here at UU Oakland, and I'm here today with Pastor Theresa Soto and Vincent Rains, our Worship Tech Associate. We are so glad to have you today, no matter where you came from, where you're worshiping today, the people you love, the money in your pocket, where you spent the night, no matter who you call your own, no matter what your questions about life and the universe, no matter your longings for a better world, you are welcome here. Here at the First Unitarian Church of Oakland, we are an intentionally multicultural, multi-generational, anti-racist, and anti-oppressive community. So that means that you can bring all your joys, all your hopes, all your sadness and fears, and find a home here. Now, if this is your first time worshiping with us, we ask you to please check out our website and newsletter for opportunities for us to get involved and to get to know you a little bit better. And whether it is your first time or your 1000th time, we are glad to have you here. Welcome to church.
We light this chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism. May it remind us of the divine spark in all of creation, the power of love to heal what is broken, and to be grateful for life's blessings each day.
We light this candle in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and work for the day in which all Black lives are treated equitably with dignity and justice.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, gathered here in the struggle and the power, gathered here.
Names for Groups. A poem about animals by Bruce Larkin. A group of geese is called a gaggle. A collection of cows is a herd. If your group is called a flock, you could be a sheep or a bird.
Wolves gather in a pack. A troop is a bunch of monkeys. Swarm can describe a group of flies, eels, and bumblebees.
Penguins live in a colony. School is the name for a group of cod. When whales get together, we call that group a pod.
Swarms, pack, herd, flock. Gaggles, colonies, schools, and groups are just some of the names for animals when they form groups.
This morning's reading comes to us from the book Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom. Remember the book of Job from the Bible? Right. Job is a good man, but God makes him suffer to test his faith. I remember. Takes away everything he has, his house, his money, his family, his health. Makes him sick to test his faith. Right, to test his faith. So I'm wondering, what are you wondering? What do you think about that? Maury coughs violently. His hands quiver as he drops them by his side. I think, he says, smiling, God overdid it. I spend a lot of time thinking about suffering. It used to be I spent a fair amount of time thinking about my own suffering, but thankfully that has diminished. I am a little bit less self-referential. I think regularly about others' suffering, about the suffering of those known to me and the sufferings of those unknown to me. My guess is that you do this as well. Since I think about suffering and about undeserved suffering, I end up thinking about Job of the Bible. This is the part of the Bible that holds the most meaning for me, a person who does not generally turn to the Bible for much at all. It turns out that there are many versions of the story of Job. The book of Job is in Hebrew scriptures, which means it's also part of the Christian canon. Job is also part of the Quran, though not in the narrative form familiar to most folks who aren't in Islam. The writer Elie Wiesel, who's Jewish, describes the story of Job as always pertinent, no matter what topic upon which the rabbis are commenting. Just to make sure we are all on the same page with regards to the stories of Job, I offer this summary that is really based in the Jewish and the Christian versions. God wagers with the adversary, called Satan in many Christian traditions, but in the original Hebrews, it's Ha-Satan, which actually means the Satan, which is more like a role, like an accuser or an adversary than a proper name. So God wagers with the Satan that Job, being a man of utter purity and integrity, a real upright, it's a biblical term, man, will not curse him no matter what happens. So this adversary first destroys all of Job's property, farm animals, and kills all his children. Job does not curse God. So the adversary ups his game of torture, and still Job does not curse God. Job, in his suffering and poverty, sitting on a heap of ashes, is approached by long-term friends who end up explaining that if Job is suffering, it must be because he has done something wrong. And finding these friends to be miserable consolers, Job wishes to bring his complaint directly to God, knowing that such a request is nearly blasphemous. However, God does appear to hear Job's complaint. God doesn't address it directly, the basic question of injustice and suffering. Instead, God, quite beautifully and eloquently, these passages are so poetically rendered, speaks of God's great and mysterious powers. God even mocks Job, who in his complaint presents as so arrogant as to question the ways of God. The book of Job has 42 chapters. The first two and the last one are written in prose, and the large middle is written in verse, in poetry. And this is very important because it's widely believed that those 3 chapters, the first 2 and the 1, were written by one source at one point in time, and that the poetry was written not only by a different source, but possibly by someone whose message was quite different. A message perhaps not only different, but contrary to the prevailing theological belief at the time of revision. There are generally 2 words that are associated with Job: suffering and patience. Particularly from a Christian and Muslim perspective, patience is the virtue for which Job is depicted as being rewarded. His patience during his innocent suffering. And if we put those 3 prose chapters together, we find an intact message that supports the general idea of patience in the face of unjust suffering. However, when we attend to the poetic dialogue between Job and his friends and between Job and God, the moral of the story shifts. The theology of retribution is what Job's friends affirm. And what is that? It's that moment when you hear an echo in your heart after something terrible has happened, or maybe just inconvenient. When we ask, as if the universe operates this way, what have I done to deserve this? It has its deeply ugly, victim-blaming side, to be sure. Like when we hear horrible things like blaming hurricanes on the gays, or police brutality on Black and brown communities, or ask the question, why do they stay in the face of intimate partner abuse? Ultimately, it is a theology and a philosophy that reasserts empire rather than allows for collective liberation. It is the theology that Job's friends try to convince him of. Job had it bad. He lost not only thousands of head of cattle, sheep, but his children, his standing in the community. His complaint, his sense of betrayal is deep. Not deep enough to dislodge his faith in God, which always stays intact, but enough to bring questions to God. One thing to remember about Job is that no matter how much acid in his complaint against God, Job always stays in dialogue with God, which is another way to say that Job always stays in covenant with God, which is important for us Unitarian Universalists to remember, especially when congregational life gets tense. Job describes his complaint as bitter, and his yearning to state his case before God consumes his whole being. For some, to bring questions to God is the same thing as to question God, question God's authority. That was certainly true back then, and there are versions of that now, both religious and secular. Think of Colin Kaepernick and his protest, his taking a knee against police brutality, and the cries and the accusations he and that whole movement have faced. In the end, despite a tone that mocks Job's brash behavior, God finds that those friends, the ones who believed in a theology of retribution, that they are wrong. God admonishes them, and God blesses Job. God blesses Job with not only a new home and new property, farm animals and such, riches beyond his wildest imagination, but also new children and living a life that is long and yet longer still. To our modern ears, this is hardly recompense. How can new children be swapped out for slain ones? There is much that is perverse about the tale of Job, but we would do well to remember that it is a tale, a fable, a way for us to extract lessons for life and living, not a how-to book. Job argues on behalf of God, not out of some doctrine handed to him from leaders and priests, but out of his own lived experience. Job responds to the dogma of his day from his three supposed friends with incredulity. He points out what they all know to be true, is that the wicked do indeed prosper. The good are not always rewarded. The mechanics, if there are any, are not that simple, though there are days and years and lifetimes when we wish they were. There are too many stories of hardship, of heartache, of undeserved suffering for us to be tricked by this falsehood. Our lives, yours and mine, testify against it. We know too many people in this world, in your community, in mine, among our families and the families of our neighbors who suffer, though they are not perfect people, though they are flawed, their suffering is not proportionate. Complaint, anger, outrage, protest, particularly in the face of betrayal, in the face of injustice, has a purpose. It is a signal of our human hunger for meaning and for justice, and it is a sign that something deeper is afoot. According to Harvard professors Robert Kagan and Lisa Leahy, complaint is the mask that covers what is underneath: concern and commitment to something deeper. It can call us to cut through illusion, repair not just our own souls, but the soul of the world. It calls us to what Judaism calls tikkun olam, a repairing and healing of the world. Anger can help us to cultivate a sense of meaning that will sustain us through hard times and even to a sturdier, more resilient life of faith, one that moves us beyond our own individual silo of suffering into connection and understanding of the sufferings of others and faithfully into our own religious tradition of enacting social justice. So the complaint department is open, but only for a limited time. Complaint is important, in some cases utterly necessary, but only in a temporary form and in a form that helps us connect our personal complaint of undeserved suffering to a larger, wider condition of unjust human suffering. If we linger too long in complaint, we can become stuck in a slippery hole of egotism and self-pity, so we must beware. Elie Wiesel, the Auschwitz survivor and writer, has a rare take on Job. Whereas most theologians interpret the scripture as ending with Job's repentance, Wiesel is not so sure. Neither am I, frankly. While the English translation of the text leads us to believe as much the Hebrew text, which has words missing in places, leaves more space for interpretation. Many experts, including Wiesel, acknowledge that the ending was grafted onto the original book, which is, of course, true for so much of the Bible, which went through so many iterations and editors over the centuries. Wiesel wonders why in this case. Is it to reassure devout believers? Is it to teach persecuted people that a person must be capable of losing everything while not giving up hope, to be patient and wait for change? Is it to strengthen the empire? Wiesel offers up his preference for an ending. Job dies without the humiliation that comes from acknowledging something that is untrue in his experience. He remains in relationship with God while staying loyal to his truth as he knows it, remaining an uncompromising and whole man. God rebukes those who hold to a theology of retribution and blesses Job in his bewilderment, in his anguish, in his complaint. Wiesel offers an image not of a patient Job or a suffering Job, but of a courageous, protesting Job. Our Unitarian Universalism without a shared creed or overarching doctrines demands much of us. Our faith requires that we, in company and accountability with each other, follow and share our truth as we understand and co-create it in community, in service of a better world and a better humanity, and to do so together. No individual's truth trumping another's, but a core of shared values helping to guide us and hold us along the way. Our faith calls us to be like Job, despite prevailing theologies or ideologies which place people into categories of reward and punishment, human, monster, deserving, undeserving, legal, illegal. We are called to be a voice for a more universalist, a more liberal understanding, a more generous and gracious way divinity works in the world. This is no easy task, as Job's life reveals. Healing ourselves, healing the world, enacting tikkun olam can bring resentment, bitter complaint, protest, isolation. But we need not stay stuck there. Let us aspire that in our truth-telling, in our being upright like Job, as best we can, that we may bend the moral arc of the universe towards healing and justice. May it be so. Amen.
Hey, Pastor Theresa, what's that on your shoulder there?
This is my beanie. It's a baby pug named Bella. I have a couple other ones too. Max, he's Pupper, and nice squishy Taco.
Oh my goodness.
What do you have?
I've got Georgie. He is my son's best friend, and they like to talk together. And then I also have Godzilla, who swam over from Japan and scares away the monsters. And we've got Dinger, who's a baseball player in Sacramento, and we miss hanging out with him this summer.
Really cool. Well, I wonder if people at church have stuffies they'd like to share with us.
I bet they do. How could they share their stuffies with the rest of the community?
I think we can put a slideshow, a link to it right under this video, and people can add their photos right to it.
That sounds
Or
like a great idea. Yeah, drawings, stories, videos, pictures. That sounds like a great idea. I can't wait to see everyone's stuffy friends.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
This is the time in our service when we pause to invite each other to the practice of generosity. These words are from Reverend Kayla Parker. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure the funds we collectively gather do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and the mission of this congregation. May we give in love and hope. You have several options for giving today. You can always mail a check to the church. It will absolutely get to the right place. You can give by text, you can give by the app, or you can go on our website and use the giving link to designate your gift there, either as a pledge, general offering, or special gift. Thank you for your generosity today. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colors, indigo red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken you in a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays in the curtain of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so, may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. Go in peace.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing. Calling my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing. Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.